me that I'm never gonna make it. They want me to do something that could make sense. They hate when I keep dreaming I'll be famous, but I don't give a fuck, I'ma keep chasing. I got all this potential that's deep inside of me, but they hate when you're successful cause they try to be. They sit there being judgmental because you try and think.
So these are the things we need for this tutorial. You can see them on the screen there, and actually I'm including the pattern paper too. So let's begin without wasting time. You divide the biggest part of your measurement by 4 and then add extra 2 inches. So my own is my bust. I divided it by 4 and I got 10.5. So I added extra 2 inches. That is the space I'm using now. So I'm going to start from the upper part of this pattern paper. I'm using it as my shoulder. So I'll first of all impute my shoulder measurement. Then I'm marking out my shoulder slope, which I used 1 inches for. Then I impute my shoulder measurement divided by 2. My shoulder measurement is 16 divided by 2 is 8. I'll mark it out there. Then I'll use my ruler and mark it out. But before I do that, I'll also mark out my neck depth, because they're all on the same line. I prefer to do everything at the same time. So here I use 3 by 2 inches. The neck depth is actually not very important when you're making a bustier pattern, especially an off-shoulder one. But I decided to impute it here. So I marked it out already. Let me now use my curve and mark it out here so that you can see it right on the screen. So the next thing I'll do now is to mark out all my measurements. So here is my shoulder to my bust, which is 11 inches. Then my shoulder to my under bust is 14 inches. Then shoulder to waist, I actually didn't mark any shoulder to waist here. I'm using the full length of this pattern paper. Actually the full length of my blouse is 25 inches and this pattern paper is around 24 inches or so. So I'll use the full length as the length of my blouse. Then my shoulder to my waist is around 17 inches. So I've imputed everything. Then I'll mark my over chest, my chest line. I use 7 inches from my shoulder length. You can actually go ahead and use 2 inches above your bust line. But right here I use 7 inches because I want this blouse to be a little bit covered. Then you label out your measurements. So if you can see the chest line, the bust line, the under bust, and the waistline. So after that we impute our darts. So you go to the bust line and impute your dart there. You go in by 4 inches using your nipple to nipple measurement. My own nipple to nipple measurement is 8. So you divide it by 2 is 4 inches. So we mark these 4 inches on each and every one of these lines. Then you do a straight line. So on this straight line is where you're going to impute your darts. For my dart, I use 0.5 inches on both sides. If you're a plus size, you can use 1 inches on both sides. So I'm imputing my darts right now. After that, we find the midpoint of our shoulder slope. So my shoulder slope is 5 inches from this video. So the midpoint should be around 2.5. I mark it out and bring it down to join my dart. From there, we try to input all our bust curves. So start from the waist, you go in by 0.5 inches. You go to the under bust too, you go in by 0.5 inches on both sides. So some people actually call this under bust tightening, waist tightening, but this 0.5 inches, you are still going to consider it when you are marking out your measurements. So also go in by 0.5 inches on the under bust, like you see me doing in this video. So also go and do your over bust tightening. So on your chest line, you go in by 0.5 inches too on both sides. After marking all this, after marking them out, you now use your curved rule to draw out these your markings. So you draw a line from your dart to go and meet your points, to meet all these points that you have marked. So I'll do that of the over bust too. Those places that you've gone in by 0.5 inches, you join them to your darts using your curved rule. So I'm trying here to straighten my curve, my markings with the curved rule. So I'll also extend my dart leg now from this my markings from using my curved rule. I'm trying to extend my dart leg down to the waist, like you see me do on this video. I also use the curved rule to extend my markings from the over bust down to the dart too, like you see me do on this video too. So I've extended all my markings. So right now the next thing will be to impute my shoulder measurements. Actually, I'm doing an off shoulder bustier, but I still need to input my shoulder measurement because I tend to use this shoulder measurement to measure out my yoke. Yes, I will need a yoke for this blouse, but because the material I have for this blouse is actually very small, so it's better to use the off shoulder bustier to measure through this blouse. Then I now add this yoke to it. So that is why I'm doing an off shoulder. But normally what I want to sew is together with shoulder blouse. So that is why I'm putting this shoulder measurement. So I've marked out my shoulder. So I will now go ahead and mark out my blouse armhole. So I'm using your curve like this. You extend your markings from your bust down to your armhole. I'm trying to mark out my off shoulder armhole. From here I'll cut out the off shoulder. So the front blouse here, I'm imputing a sweetheart neckline. So I'll take it down to the center front. This is actually what a sweetheart neckline looks like, as you can see from the center front. So having marked that out, we now go in and start imputing our measurements. Normally I don't include my darts. I simply mark out my measurements and cut. So on my patterns I don't include any other allowances, but when I want to cut the pattern on the fabric, I input my allowances. So my round underbrush is 36 divided by 4 is 9 inches. So right here I will include the 2 inches for that here, which is 11 inches. I've marked it out there. Then my waist is 14 inches. So before I do that, I'm going to label my patterns. Don't forget to do that. Always label your patterns to avoid confusion. So right now I'll go and do my the back pattern using the same method I used for the front pattern, but we don't have cleavages at the back. So right here, we will not do any bust adjustment or curve. I'll just input my shoulder measurements, input my darts, and find the shoulder slope of the back and input them. I think our back pattern is really like that. You can understand it by looking at what I'm doing from this video. I made it very, very brief. So I input my bust measurements and my waist measurements and the length. So I'm putting my darts here. Exactly. You also go in by 4 inches using your nipple to nipple measurements. So input your darts. I think the back pattern is actually one of the simplest ones to do. This is your shoulder slope, midpoint of your shoulder slope, you input it. So right now you're going to input the shape that you want for your back pattern. So right, I want to make a tapered zip pattern where you insert your zip to be a little bit raised. So that's what I want to do with this blouse. So I'll now mark out the beginning of my back. That is actually what I'm trying to do here. This is the shape I am looking to achieve. So I'll now go ahead and cut it out.
I'm making a